The verse of the day is Acts 10:34-36, and it says, "Then Peter replied, I see very clearly that God shows no favoritism. In every nation he accepts those who fear him and do what is right. This is the message of good news for the people of Israel, that there is peace with God through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all." There is so much good in this verse. The title of today's portion of scripture is called "The Gentiles Hear the Good News." And we've covered some verses in this chapter already where we talked about how God was trying to communicate to the Jewish people that he accepts everyone, including the Gentiles. And to review the context of what's happening back in the day, the Gentiles and the Jews did not hang out. So as God is trying to build the church, he's trying to teach the Jewish people that salvation isn't just for them, it's for everyone. So this is Peter understanding that God doesn't show favoritism. Just because the Jewish people were God's chosen people, that doesn't mean that they're the only people that can be saved now because what Jesus has done. I love how it says, "I see very clearly that God shows no favoritism." There are so many times in the Bible and when Jesus was alive where he didn't show favoritism, where he broke the cultural standard of what's right in terms of talking to the woman at the well or hanging out with certain people or hanging out with sinners. He always defied what culture thought was wrong, but it was always from the motive of love. It was always from the motive of wanting all of those people to feel seen and loved. And that's the heart of God. That was the heart of God moving in Jesus. And Jesus is a human version of God. So the life of Jesus is the heart of God, which is why it's so important, if you're new to reading the Bible, to read the story of Jesus, read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, because those stories are the story of Jesus. And Jesus, the life of Jesus reflects the heart of God. And you'll see so many times that Jesus chose love. He didn't show favoritism. He chose certain people to run with him, but he loved everyone. Verse 35 says, "In every nation he accepts those who fear him and do what is right." He accepts those who fear him. I think a lot of times we can get that word kind of mixed up or confused, and people are like, why would I want to fear God? That makes him sound scary. And I just see all the time that people don't get it. Fear of God is not a scary feeling. It's actually a motivating feeling. It's knowing who God is in your life. It's knowing that you can't do life without him. A fear of God is knowing that without God being first in your life would be a mess. So you understand that he has to be first. It's like this dependency that you know you have to be obedient because you understand what happens when you aren't. And that's not to say that God is a mean, cruel person. It's to say that he puts rules in place to protect our heart, to protect our soul from becoming something it never was meant to become. And so you start to see that every single thing that God says is for protection. So you want that fear of God over fear of man, over anything. You want to prioritize God over everything because you understand that when you start to fear man, it doesn't go well for you. When you start to fear other things and your priorities get out of order, that's when sin enters the picture. That's when fear of failure enters the picture. That's when depression, anxiety, all of those things enter the picture. But when you keep God first and you fear him, you're able to release any false burdens. You're able to kind of let go and let him move in your life. Because as human beings, we take on way too many things and we try to do things independent of God when we were never meant to do that. We were always meant to run with God, to do life with God. And it's when we fear him, when we know who he is in our life, putting him first, that we see the fruit of God show in our life. And then you might be like, well, what's the fruit of God? The fruit of God is the Spirit of God, because we have the Spirit of God if you believe in Jesus. The fruit of the Spirit is peace, love, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. All of that is going to bear from your life when you put God first. But when God isn't first and it's out of order, that's when fruit that's not like God starts to creep in. That's when worry and doubt and fear and anxiety and depression and jealousy and anger and judgment enter the picture. So God is trying to keep us away from those things because he knows it causes us harm. He knows it draws us away from his love. And his love is the whole point. His love is how we become who we were created to be, because without his love, our heart can't be whole. Without his love, we can't understand what it means to be unconditionally loved. So then we're going to be performing for love as if we're not enough. And God says you're enough. God says you're worthy as you are. God says, I created you because I knew you had worth. I created you with worth. You don't have to prove it. You just get to be filled up with reminders of my love, of why I created you. Then it says, this is the message of good news for the people of Israel, that there is peace with God through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all. So if you look at each verse, I love the order. Verse 34 talks about how God shows no favoritism. So every single human on the planet is able to be a part of what we're talking about today. Verse 35 says, in every nation he accepts those who fear him. So understanding you have the opportunity to be a part of God's family. He accepts you. All you have to do is follow his lead and open the door for him to be the leader. You can't have someone be the leader of your life if you don't want them to. You can't have someone lead your life if you're not aware of who they are and where they are. In order to follow someone's lead, you have to get to know who they are. You have to understand what it means to follow them. You have to understand how they work and how they move and what the rules are. And the good news about God is his rules are to protect us. I will say that till the day I die. And verse 36 then says, this is good news. And if you do all of that, there is peace with God through Jesus. There is peace with God through Jesus. And you might be like, okay, why through Jesus? Jesus had to come because sin entered the world. Sin drew us away from peace. Sin drew us away from God. Jesus had to die and rise again to defeat sin, to prove to the evil one and to prove to all of us that he has power over every evil thing. So now with Jesus, the Spirit of God, which we only get the Spirit of God because Jesus rose again, went to heaven and left his Spirit on earth for us so that we could now become more like him and bear his fruit. We now get peace because peace comes from God. We're able to have peace when our circumstances don't look good because we're able to root our identity in God, in the one who created us, in the one who never changes. Today's verses remind me of who God is and what I have access to. God doesn't show favoritism. So if you're feeling like you're not being used, or you're not feeling the love of God, or you're not feeling connected, you need to understand God shows no favoritism. How he uses anyone is how he can use you. It's all dependent on how we fear him and prioritize him and walk with him and build relationship with him. So your part is just spending time in his word, spending time with him, because it's in that time that you understand how unconditionally loved you are. And when you understand how unconditionally loved you are, you start to flow in the gifting you were made with. And then you start to flow with the peace of God, which helps you stand confident, which helps you see how you can be used and why God created you. Okay?